Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Zoom meeting on the Wilmington Recreation Center and Proposition 68. Today is Wednesday, December 9th, 2020, at around 1:16. Now, the Wilmington Rec Center is under the control of the Department of Rec and Parks, and it has its own website. And here is some contact information if you would like to contact the center for information on the current status and the programming. Now, this meeting is being live streamed via Facebook. And once the meeting is adjourned, we will provide a recorded version of this meeting on our YouTube page. And here is the link. And Yumi will also provide that link in the chat box for you. To go over some of the meeting guidelines, we have a sign-in sheet, and that sign-in sheet is actually in the chat box. So we encourage you to, even including the panelists, we encourage you to sign up and register. This is actually very important for the grant. Later on, we're going to have a questions and answers section. And so feel free to post all your questions in the chat box during the meeting on both Zoom and Facebook. And what we'll do is that once the questions and answers section is there, we'll go ahead and answer the questions one by one. If you also happen to speak Spanish, feel free to write your questions in Spanish. We will try our best to translate and provide an answer for you. And also at the end of the meeting, we'll have an audience survey link. And the survey link will provide you with a means to provide us with feedback on how we're doing. And to present to you today's panelists, we have Jacob Hayek, the Deputy Chief of Staff from the Office of Councilmember Joe Buscaino. We also have Fernando Navarrete, Field Deputy from Wilmington, from the Office of Councilmember Joe Buscaino. And we have Daryl Ford, Superintendent of the Rec and Parks Planning, Construction, and Maintenance. And we have also Bill Jones, who may join us, the Chief Management Analyst from the Rec and Parks Grants Administration. I'm Stephen Tran, a Senior Management Analyst from the Rec and Parks Grants Administration section. We also have Yumi Sungen, Management Assistant from the Rec and Parks Grants Administration section. And translating for us in Spanish is Jorge Rodas from Barbier International. And to give you an overview of today's meeting, first we'll do some introductions with an opening remark from CD15. We'll also go over the guidelines of Proposition 68, share with you some of the round 3 results, and we'll go over a proposed Wilmington Rec Center project. We'll present the round 3 scope of work that was submitted last year, and also present you the updated scope of work. Then we'll have our questions and answers. We'll go over the survey, and we'll have some closing remarks from the CD15. So before we begin, Jacob or Fernando, would you like to offer us an opening remark?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, Jacob can do the English part and I'll translate in Spanish.
Perfect, thank you so much. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and also our Rec and Parks team. This has taken a lot of time and work to pull together this application, pull together all the data and information, but just want to reassure the community that we do these meetings not simply because they're required, but because we want to hear from you and what you want to see and in this park. It is you that's going to be using it, you that's going to enjoy it, and it's also you that's going to help us protect it and maintain it. So we do these meetings to make sure that everything that we can possibly fit in here, the things we can go after to make your community better, make your park experience better, that's what we want to do. And we're blessed to have this amazing team, with Daryl and the Prop 68 team. We have worked tirelessly to pull this together, despite COVID, just continue to move the ball forward and make sure that this is a very good and competitive grant application. So I want to thank you, community, for joining us and helping us guide us along the way. Please, please, please speak up. Let us know your thoughts and what you want. But also thank you to our Rec and Park team. Just you guys are amazing. I know times are tough, but we appreciate all that you've done. And also a little kudos out to Fernando, our Wilmington deputy. Councilman calls him the councilman of Wilmington. He lives and breathes Wilmington and is always advocating for all the different services and money we can bring to Wilmington. So just so proud of him. So thank you. Let's have an amazing meeting and look forward to us getting this grant approved.
Thanks, Jacob.
Perfect, and I'll just translate. Sí, muchas gracias a la comunidad y al Departamento de Recreación y Parques por tener esta junta. Como dijo mi colega Jacobo, no solamente tenemos estas juntas porque son requeridas, pero la verdad las tenemos para poder tomar todos los comentarios y sugerencias de la comunidad, porque al final del día esos proyectos son para la comunidad de Wilmington y queremos tomar todas esas sugerencias y comentarios para la verdad demostrar y tener un parque que sea la reflexión de lo que quieren ver en este parque. Unas fuertes gracias al Departamento de Parques y todos sus trabajadores, aunque estamos pasando por una pandemia y los tiempos son difíciles, ellos han hecho todo el esfuerzo para ver que podamos someter esta aplicación para esta beca estatal de la proposición 68 para poder agarrar y obtener fondos estatales para la verdad convertir este parque a algo hermoso. Así que por favor, si tienen cualquier preguntas, comentarios, hoy es el día para hacerlos. De nuevo, nosotros en nuestra oficina del concejal Joe Buscaino, el Departamento de Parques, queremos agarrar todos esos comentarios para que la verdad tengamos toda la información necesaria para presentarles un parque hermoso para que lo pueda disfrutar la pregunta, disfrutar la comunidad. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you, Fernando. So you may wonder why we are here, so I'll go over some of the meeting objectives. So this meeting is to inform you of this funding opportunity, which is Proposition 68. The Department of Rec and Parks will resubmit a grant application for the fourth and final round of Proposition 68 applications. We will present to you an updated project for funding. And of course, we want to hear from of what you have to say and your ideas on this updated project. So last year, as part of the round 3 application, the Department of Rec and Parks essentially hosted 5 meetings. And in total, we had about 417 participants for those 5 meetings. Now, just to overview the Proposition 68 requirements, Proposition 68 is here to create new parks and new recreation opportunities in critically underserved communities. The Proposition 68 was approved on June 5th of 2018 by 57% of the voters. Now, we are currently in round 4, which is the 4th and final round of Proposition 68. I just want to also let you know that even though we have the 4th round, the reality is that Proposition 68 was divided into 2 rounds, round 3 and round 4. So this is the last opportunity for us to apply for Prop 68 funding. Currently, round 4 has $395 million of funding available for competitive grants. So this is a competitive grant, which means that funding is not guaranteed. Now, the maximum grant request per park and per project is $8.5 million. The applications are due on March 12th of 2021, which is an extended deadline. Originally, the state's deadline was for December 14th. So if we are to receive a grant from Proposition 68 in the state, the project must be completed by March 2025. So to go over some of the round 3 results, during round 3, the state received 478 applications, which requested a total of $2.3 billion. Now, out of that $3 billion, the state could only provide up to $254.9 million in terms of grants. So it was a very competitive process. The average grant request, meaning the average grant proposal, was for $4.8 million. And the average grant amount, meaning the average grant award that was provided to the grantees, was $4.1 million. So even though the maximum amount that an agency can apply for is $8.5 million, the average grant was $4.1 million, basically less than half of that. In terms of the number of applications, out of the 478 applications received, 62 were awarded. And the city of Los Angeles actually received 4 grant awards. So how many new parks were funded? Out of the 62 projects that were awarded, 28 was to create new parks, 14 were for expansions of existing parks, and 20 were for renovations. So the state had prioritized the construction and building of new parks and expansions. Now, the project that we are submitting to the state, both last year and this year, would be considered a renovation project. So in order to qualify for funding, this center has to qualify, under either or both categories. So either we have less than 3 acres per 1,000 people, or the median household income has to be less than $56,982. And so because the median household income is $43,474, it is well less than $56,000, and that's why this application would qualify. And at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Daryl Ford, our superintendent for planning, construction, and maintenance.
Hi, everyone. And again, my name is Daryl Ford. I'm the superintendent for Recreation Parks, Planning, Construction, and Maintenance branch. So here today in this meeting to talk at this point a little bit about the application that we noted was previously submitted for Proposition 68 for the Wilmington Recreation Center. So just to talk through briefly what we submitted last round and the community outreach that was done for that and some of the improvements that were identified as a part of that process. And then to speak a little to what we are proposing to submit again for round 4, and to talk through a little bit of the changes that we're recommending be made to that application. As noted at the beginning of this presentation, and I know as Jacob had noted, we're here to listen, to hear from you, your thoughts and your input. The community's input is what makes our application strong and makes sure that what we're applying for is reflective of the priorities of your community. So starting with this slide, this is just the slide before you, just summarizing high level the feedback that we received on our previous application and noting some of the items that were prioritized in those responses. And you can just see here in the slide, or I'll just explain for those who aren't looking at it, Sports field improvements were called out as one of the #1 things to do. Renovation of the playground was next. Following up with that was field lighting and park lighting, air conditioning for the recreation center building, and then general accessibility and walking paths. So those were some of the 5 key improvements that came out of there. In addition to that, there was discussion of upgrading the restrooms and adding new restrooms, providing better fitness equipment there, and doing what we can to improve the trees and the shade canopy at the park. So that was some of the feedback that we got that informed the round 3 application that we put in, and we'll talk about that right now. So the next slide is a concept plan that was submitted by the city for funding under Proposition 68 round 3. Again, this is the plan that was unfortunately not funded, but again, based on the community input that we received, we developed this concept and this layout for the project. Just quickly to go through what was submitted last time. We had proposed to do a new playground with rubberized surface, so in the same location as the existing playground. We proposed to develop a new picnic area, just to renovate the one that's on the Neptune side of the park. We proposed to do baseball field improvements and enhancements, including new backstops, lighting, so effectively to upgrade the 2 diamonds that we have there. We had proposed to add a small new synthetic field just to the west of the parking lot. We had proposed in that application to add a new splash pad, which in this concept would have been located to the west of the, or sorry, to the north of the playground. I'm looking at it. On this image, it would be to the west, but effectively it's to the north. And then finally, to add some batting cages and new equipment along with our baseball field improvements. So that was the main outdoor item scopes that was included in the application. Additionally, we were proposing to do improvements to the recreation center building, including new air conditioning, and then upgrades to the existing restrooms inside the building for ADA compliance. And then lastly, we were proposing to do a variety of general improvements throughout the park, pathway, fencing, ADA upgrades, and security lighting. So again, based on the input we received in our last process, this was the scope that we developed and we had submitted to the state for funding under round 3. But again, unfortunately was not funded. So we just wanted to talk through really quickly that general overall scope that was submitted, and then kind of lean into what was done in the round 4. So the next slide that's in front of you now is a breakdown of the proposed scope for the new application that we'd like to submit for round 4. Effectively, it mirrors the scope that we had submitted in round 3 with one significant change. So the main change here that we've made from round 3 to round 4 is that we are proposing to eliminate the splash pad. So just again, quickly going down through the scope items that we're proposing to do in round 4, ball field refurbishments, picnic area upgrades, landscaping, lighting, fitness equipment, renovation of the parking lot that's there, the playground, to renovate and replace the playground, do the renovations to the recreation center building, and the new synthetic walking path or synthetic field, and then a new walking path. Those are the major scope items. But we are proposing to remove from what we previously submitted the splash pad. There's 2 primary reasons why we're proposing to do that. One is, of course, as everyone knows, there is a very nice splash pad located just across the street from the park. So there's a splash pad in the adjacent park that is available for the community. And secondly, we're also proposing to limit the splash pad just in recognition of the city's budget and financial situation. Splash pads are very high and intensive maintenance equipment. So we wanted to make sure we were focusing our scope again on the key items that were identified through the community outreach, and also were the items that we think we will have the resource to be able to maintain. Obviously, what we don't want to do is to come into the community, develop a lot of new park improvements, and then not be able to maintain those to the quality that the community would expect. So in this application, that's a significant change. We're proposing to remove the splash pad. One thing though I neglected to mention, and that we'll talk about in just a moment in the round 4 scope on the next slide, is we are proposing to add a new restroom in the park. So if you're looking at the presentation, there's a small blue box that's shown kind of right in the middle of the screen, and again, just adjacent to the playground. We are still proposing to add a freestanding restroom building in the park, again, in recognition of the input that we received in round 3 for the need for new restrooms. we also thought it would be a great idea to continue to keep a new field restroom in the park. And we identified this location here between the playground, the fitness equipment, and where the proposed new synthetic field would go. So on the screen now, again, is just the conceptual layout for these improvements. And as I previously noted, these improvements are essentially the same as what was proposed in round 3, with the elimination of that splash pad. So the layout you're looking at is essentially the same layout as the previous project. So that is the short summary on what we are proposing to resubmit to the state for funding under Proposition 68, round 4. Again, we are keeping it focused on the improvements that were identified and prioritized by the community. And these are the improvements we think that, as we're submitting a renovation project, we think will be received favorably by the state. Just one last thing before we dive into the questions and answers that I wanted to make sure I highlighted for everyone on this call and in this meeting is that you also may be aware that we've been working very closely, we the city have been working very closely to try to bring some new stormwater capture improvements to Wilmington Recreation Center. Wilmington Recreation Center has also been identified for a potential project that could be funded through Measure W, which is a countywide stormwater funding that would enable the city, if it's funded through that program, to bury some infiltration tanks underneath the ball fields that are currently at Wilmington Recreation Center. That's another reason why we thought this would be a very good application to resubmit to the state, because if that project, that stormwater capture project is funded, these two projects could work hand in hand, so that if those fields are removed in order to bury a cistern or do stormwater capture improvements, we could come back with this state funding and put on top of those tanks brand new fields and brand new improvements. So this is a good opportunity for us to work in concert with other planned and proposed improvements at Wilmington Recreation Center to really make sure that when all the improvements are said and done, that the park is functioning fully to provide the recreational needs of the facility, but also can play a part in our overall goals to capture, treat, and clean our water. So just wanted to make sure I highlighted that fact that we are working closely with our colleagues over at the LA Sanitation and the Environment and others to make sure that all of our projects are working in concert to bring all the improvements that we need in the community. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. And then again, as noted in the beginning of the meeting, we're here to hear from you, get your input, answer any questions you may have, and get your feedback on what we're proposing to do. So thank you.
Questions from both this Zoom meeting as well as Facebook Live. Okay. Sorry, the sound sort of like went off a little bit, but yes, as I was saying, we are going to answer questions from our both Zoom chat box and also Facebook Live. So the first question is the new layout is without batting cages? That's a question.
The batting cages are in the new layout. So if you're looking at the image on the screen, the batting cages are to the right of the Recreation Center building in the same location as round 3. So we are still proposing to do the batting cages as a part of this project. They're shown in kind of a purple box there on the image.
Okay. So there's a question in Spanish from Gabby. Actually, no, it's just a comment. Okay, so one question is, for the ones that don't know, can you explain what Proposition 68 and why does Proposition 68 and elective funding rather than grant some funding to those critical underserved communities and parks? So I hope that the presentation sort of helped you out in understanding Proposition 68. So this fourth round of applications is a competitive grant process. And what that means is that we are working, to put together, we're going to assemble a grant application for the project that Daryl just described. And we're going to put together, along with this grant application, a narrative. We are going to complete all the forms that the state requires us to complete, submit with that a budget, and that will go as a package to the state. The state will will review the application, make sure that it conforms with its guidelines, which are the two things that I just went over, which is it has to be less than 3 acres per 1,000 people, or basically within or less than a particular medium income household threshold. So if we comply with either or of those thresholds, then we would be deemed to comply. This is along with the other requirements of the grants. But once we put this grant application together, it is reviewed and assessed by the state, and it will be reviewed along with all of the applications. So a lot of this is dependent, our success rate is dependent on, number one, the state's priorities, which in previous, during round 3, the state has stated that its priority is new parks and expansion of parks. Now in this particular round may or may not be different. That is up to the state. And it also depends on how many applications are received. So this is why we call it a competitive grant program. And the two thresholds, that were referenced are basically there to ensure that only certain, parks and applications are being reviewed. And so this park and the surrounding community does qualify for Prop 68 grant funding. And so that's why we are applying.
Hi, Stephen. This is Bill Jones. I'd like to just add to that for everybody's edification. As Stephen pointed out, Prop 68 is a statewide grant, and therefore the city of Los Angeles is competing against all the other communities throughout the state. But I think more importantly, to the point of those parks that are in the critical underserved communities, the city does have access to other grant programs such as Measure A, where that is the intent of those grant programs. So while we see Prop 68 as an opportunity to get a lot of work done at this park, Wilmington, there are other programs that don't necessarily have as much money, but that those funds will be flowing into Wilmington in the future, regardless of whether Prop 68 is awarded or not. So I just wanted to point that out, that Prop 68 is not the only grant program that's out there. We do have many that we're pursuing. Depending upon the areas, some parks are eligible for those funds, some parks are not, just depending upon the nature of the park and what the improvements that need to be made. But I do want to point out there that it's a very important question about those critically underserved communities, and that is our focus when we do go after these grant programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Hey, Yumi, there's a question from Gabby at 1:39 p.m. Can you translate the question? Is the city going to plant California native or California appropriate plants and trees in this project?
Hi, this is Daryl. The answer is yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephen. And going back to that question from Gabby at 1:39, it's more or less a comment stating that all these changes seem rather useless if the community does not enjoy it.
Well, thank you, Gabby, for your comment. Will this have any impact on the teen center?
Hi again, it's Daryl Ford. No, this would not have any impact on the teen center. The scope of work for this proposed project, none of it is impacting the teen center.
Okay. Next question. Are the new bathrooms going to be self-cleaning or still maintained by LA Parks or serviced by the city?
Again, Daryl Ford. So the idea here would likely be that we would investigate the use of a self-cleaning restroom here. There's a model of self-cleaning restroom that we have recently deployed in one of our parks and that we're looking for additional locations to deploy. This certainly could be another location where we could deploy that self-cleaning restroom model. That typically is our preference to go ahead and do that. So at this point, that would be what we would investigate. We'll obviously, when we get to the point of designing the project, we'll work that out. But yes, certainly this would be a great location for one of our self-cleaning restrooms.
Thank you. When this goes to round 4, what are the chances to get the entire project approved? Or is this a competitive process with other projects? So I hope I answered your question earlier, and as well as Bill, in regards to this process. It is a competitive grant, and we are competing with the rest of the state. And so our chances will be dependent on essentially who applies and how many are applying and what kind of projects they're applying for.
I see a comment from Gabby again stating that many people feel like they are owners of the park and they are allowed to do whatever they want there. And sometimes the community, the actual community, is afraid to go and enjoy the park.
So, Yumi, this is Bill Jones. I understand Gabby's concern there. We've heard it in a number of our parks. And if she will reach out to either the staff there at Wilmington, or if she will email me her concerns directly at bill.jones@lacity.org, I will pass her concerns along to our park rangers, who will work with the Los Angeles Police Department to ensure that those parks are available to everybody and that the rules of the parks are followed. I know it's not as simple as just going in there once to do that. It is something that takes time. But again, if she will forward her comments to me or her concerns, I will ensure that those get to the right part of our department to ensure that they can be addressed. Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Bill.
hi, and sorry, Stephen, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is Daryl Ford. So just I guess a follow-up on that comment. We did not expressly indicate in our scope the addition of additional security cameras at the park. I believe, and if memory serves me correctly, I apologize, that there may be one over by the skate park. So a question to the group here, would we like cameras to be added expressly to the scope here? Because we were going to include park lighting in our scope. Typically, we just fold cameras in there, but just wanted to confirm if the group thinks that security cameras should expressly be part of the scope we submit to the state. We do those in a lot of our projects. Again, along with park lighting, it's very efficient to do it that way. Just wanted to put that out there. Again, if there's concerns about safety, we do security cameras at a lot of our facilities. So we are happy to do that, and that's why we're here. It's just, oh, never mind, I see the comment there. So just wanted to put that out there, that we can expressly add security cameras to our scope.
Thanks, Daryl. And later on, we will have a survey available for the audience members to participate in, and you can certainly express, what you like in that survey. In addition to that, there is a slide, earlier that had the contacts for the Wilmington Rec Center, and we will provide that email address, in the chat box. Thank you for explaining about Prop 68 and its process. You're welcome. There's another question from Gabby at 144. Thank you, Bill and Stephen, Bill, for getting to the point of Prop 68. This is not a point I'm reaching to. Thank you, Bill Jones. Okay, and thank you, Daryl, for the questions, answering the questions on the restrooms. Where are the cameras in the plan?
The cameras are, again, Daryl Ford, the cameras should not be included in this level of conceptual plan. What we'll make sure that we do for the revised concept and for the scope is that we expressly add security cameras. Ultimately, what will happen is if we are awarded funding for this project, we'll work with the vendor that we have that develops our camera systems for us, and they will put together a plan to make sure that there's sufficient coverage in the park of the areas of concern. So part of what would be helpful, I know this is early since we're just applying for funds, but if there are specific areas identified in the park where you want to make sure we have camera coverage, just make that note or let us know those things. We will, of course, work with the staff to verify that, but we do have a camera vendor that we work with who will help us prepare those layouts to ensure that there's adequate camera coverages in the areas of concern and that the lighting is sufficient in those areas in order to make those cameras effective. So we drill down to that level of detail once we get to once we're funded, and then once we get into the project design, and we'll start to detail out where those cameras would be located. But conceptually, we'll make sure that we're noting in our application to the state the addition of security cameras along with new park lighting.
Thanks, Daryl. We will get to Gabby's question at 150 shortly once it's translated.
Yes, Stephen, I can answer that now. Again, Gabby's question is building on security. It's asking specifically, will they have more security for the people who actually visit the park? So physical bodies. I'm interpreting. Thank you. Those are my concerns, and these are the concerns of my neighbors. Of course, I believe that having cameras is an excellent idea, though.
Thanks, Gabby. From the grants perspective, the cameras would qualify for grant funding. However, security guards would not be an eligible expense under the Prop 68 grant guidelines. So we'll get to the Gabby's question at 150. Okay. So another comment, thank you. Batting cages will be huge and popular in Wilmington. Will there be upgrade and improvements to the indoor and outdoor basketball courts?
Hi again, Daryl Ford. Currently we're planning to, for the outdoor basketball courts, we were planning to add new bleachers, but we were not planning to have those courts resurfaced again. But again, if you are denoting that there may be a need to upgrade those courts, please do let us know. But we were proposing to add new covered bleachers at the basketball courts. And if you're looking at the concept in front of you, there's a small yellow square, both adjacent to the synthetic soccer field and adjacent to the basketball court. So that's where we were proposing to add covered bleachers, but we were not proposing to upgrade those courts. But please do let us know if that's something we overlooked. And as to the interior courts, we were not proposing again to do upgrades to those courts as part of this project. Inside the building, we were mainly going to focus on the restrooms and making sure there's sufficient HVAC. But please, again, if there is a need for upgrading the courts, just either let us know in the chat box or just chime in so that we can make sure that we don't overlook any necessary scope items.
Thanks, Daryl. As a question from the Chamber of Commerce, and are letters of support not helpful? I apologize if I need to get to another call. Okay, as far as the grant guidelines, the guidelines do not call for the inclusion of letters of support. Certainly, the type of support that the state is actually looking for is your participation in these meetings and your input. And so we encourage you, as people have in this, session to, let us know your feedback on these projects.
Stephen, this is Bill Jones. I would just add to that. I did respond to Dan saying that, yes, letters of support are always helpful. To your point specifically, yes, the state parks does discourage letters of support. However, we want our state representatives to know that our communities are very active and we will be including letters of support in our grant applications. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Added to the outside basketball court, maybe add to projects at least cover or service the cracks on the blacktop surface to make it level.
Received, thank you. So we'll investigate the resurfacing of the court. We appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it for, okay, we have one more question from, okay. What will be the realistic cost of the overall projects? And if there will be cuts that have to be made to ensure the project, how will those decisions be made?
I'll go ahead and jump in here. So I guess just as a way of background, for the previous Proposition 68 application that we had submitted in round 3, we had estimated the total project costs at approximately $1.8 million. We believe that this revised scope will be slightly cheaper than that. We haven't finished the cost estimating process yet, but with the elimination of the splash pad element, we believe that there'll be some reduction in that overall cost. So again, that's scope that we're working on and cost estimate that we're working on. Obviously, one of the things we wanted to do before we finalized that budget number was to have this meeting and make sure we weren't missing any items. So based on this conversation, we'll be adding in a few different things to make sure we've covered them and our way to finalize that scope. And just briefly to speak about what would be cut out, I know that Bill and others can jump in here as well. The state will either fund the entirety of our project or they won't fund it at all. So it's kind of an all or nothing. So the final scope that we send into the state is the scope we think should be the scope we think is the most competitive and includes all the elements that we believe are most critical to make sure the community is able to enjoy the park. So that's why it's very important that we get your input and your feedback and your thoughts, because we want to make sure what we submit to the state is reflective of the improvements that the community truly desires to the park and that we can fit within the maximum grant amount for the Proposition 68 program.
Thank you, Daryl. This is Bill Jones. Yes, to Daryl's point, the Prop 68 is an all or nothing grant. So if the project is awarded, we will have a pot of money. If let me back up. So the pot of money we do not expect would be reduced once it is received. That typically the state, once they fund something, that funding is available for that project. Should there be cost overruns, we still have an obligation with the state to complete the project. So we will be looking at some of our other funding sources, other grant opportunities to make up the difference and provide gap funding to this project. We do not envision that we would be starting construction and then eliminating projects once construction begins. So it would be one that once we go into construction where we have a plan, we would be looking to complete all of the projects that are on the table for that park. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
There's another question from Gabby on, we will get to that.
Yes, Stephen, I can translate that now.
Okay.
What do we as the community have to do to give our support for Proposition 68 or show the state that we do support this project?
Stephen, this is Bill Jones. I'll jump in and just say that your support and participation here today is incredible. If you talk to your neighbors and friends, we will be accepting comments on the project on our YouTube channel. Once that is available, you can still provide comments and feedback. So please encourage any family members or friends, participants that you know that are utilizing the park, please provide comments to this. That is what is most important to the state, that they see that the community is deeply involved and wants to see this project move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So I encourage you to actually sign in, and also participate in our survey and use that medium to express, your feedback. Good luck and hope all the hard work gets noticed and considered for the better community. Thank you. We will translate those, as we get to the questions. Thank you, Nancy.
Right, and I can translate that right now for you, Stephen. Personally, I think a park with water would be very useful in this community since the weather is very hot.
So Stephen, this is Bill Jones again. I want to point out that while the splash pad has been removed at this time for the Prop 68 portion, that does not mean that there won't be a splash pad at Wilmington Park at some point in the future. We will continue to look for funds, and if that is one of the key things the committee would like to see, we will certainly pursue that down the road. Right now, it is, as Darryl pointed out, with the economic condition of the city, and the maintenance that is involved in splash pads and the regulatory requirements through county health, it is a feature that we feel the grant will be more successful if it does not include the splash pad at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Darryl had mentioned earlier, no, there is a splash pad across the street. How will the batting cages be maintained, and are the cages rental or free to the community?
Hi again, Darryl Ford. That's an operational detail that we'd have to talk about with the recreation staff. I don't think any of us on the call could answer that, but certainly those are the details that we'd work out working with recreation about the best way to manage those batting cages. So don't have an answer for you today. We'll make sure to make a note of it and follow up with our recreation staff as this moves forward.
And for Sonia, I hope you have received the link to both the survey and the sign-in sheet, and let us know if you cannot find that. Thank you, Yumi. There's also the last comment was from Nancy.
Right, and it reads as follows. Yes, of course. I believe seeking out more funds is a good idea. We have many organizations or groups who are willing to collaborate with you.
Thank you. So Sonia, we actually do have the link to the sign-in sheet. Let us know if you cannot access it. Okay. I think that's all for Zoom right now. Yumi, do we have any questions on Facebook?
There are no questions currently on the Facebook Live feed.
Okay.
Yumi, this is Bill Jones. I think the concern is that we sent out two links side by side and they look very similar. Would you resend the link for the sign-in sheet?
I will do that right now.
Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Fernando here.
Hi, Fernando.
Hey, I have a question from Mike Herrera. He's on the phone call. He can't get on the chat, but I'll ask it for him. So this is a question from Mike Herrera, Executive Director of the Wilmington Teen Center. His question is, can the trees on the northeast of the outdoor basketball court be removed? They were used for soccer and football back in the day before the trees were planted.
This is Bill Jones. I'll jump in very quickly and just say that I know trees are very sacred in the city these days, but if there are some ideas, if we can leave those in the comments, certainly we've captured it here on the audio portion. I would imagine it's something we can look at and explore and get back to the community on. It will not be part of the Prop 68 application, but again, we're interested in all ideas around the park today. So thank you.
And hi, this is Darryl Ford. Just to follow up on that, and please do correct me if I'm misunderstanding the commentary. I think part of what we heard in our previous community meetings was the desire for more space for those types of activities. And one of the responses to that was the inclusion of that small synthetic field that's currently proposed to go in between the parking lot and the basketball court. So we did hear that there was a desire for more space for soccer and other activities. And I think in response to that, one of our suggestions was to go ahead and insert that small synthetic play surface, which would be easier to keep up, of course, than grass, but also would provide a dedicated space for those types of activities. So I don't know if that directly addresses the kind of the concerns around the trees or how the area used to be used, but I do recall that from some of our previous discussions and just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. So I think we've reached, oh, okay, there's another question that came up. The trash area often overruns with trash, especially on the weekends. Will that be addressed?
This is Bill Jones. We'll certainly pass that information along to our maintenance division. Again, it's not something that will be part of the Prop 68 grant application, but we will pass that information along to our maintenance crews and let them know of that concern. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just wait for a few more seconds just to see if any question comes up. From Sonia, I just want to thank you guys for everything that you're doing. God bless. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for your presentation. Best of luck to your team in bringing these much needed improvements to our parks in Wilmington. Thank you, Rudy. Okay, so unless I don't see any more question. So just to conclude, Jacob and Fernando, would you like to offer some closing remarks?
Yeah, for sure. Jacob, do you want to do the English part and I can translate in Spanish? Maybe Jacob's not on. It's okay, I can do it. No, I just want to definitely thank everyone for their time. The turnout was amazing, both the Zoom meeting and the Facebook Live. I'm glad that we had great participation. I know the third round we had extensive participation as well. So it's always great to see the community involved in these conversations, because again, this is a benefit for the community. So I think the Rec and Parks team has a lot to digest, and definitely the proposal is great. I want to take the opportunity to thank the entire Rec and Parks staff for putting this together and hearing everyone's input. I want to thank the community, everyone involved, the Chamber of Commerce, the Needy Wilmington, everyone else who I'm missing, SVCC Thrive LA, for taking the time to ask these questions, put your input. Again, this, although we are required to have these meetings, the reason why we have these meetings is to get all that feedback. So on behalf of Councilman Joe Buscarino, thank you all for the time, and thank you all for the input.
Thank you, Fernando. And so this concludes our meeting for the Wilmington Rec Center and Prop 68. Thank you very much for just attending and making this a very inquisitive and lively event. On behalf of RAP, we wish you the best in terms of the end of the year, and we will certainly work our best to make sure that we give it the best possible shot at this application to make this a successful grant. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.